Welcome to ARC's Supernova 2023. Tonight's 4 roundtable discussions feature our outstanding scholars in interactive conversations with distinguished moderators. While these scholars are not necessarily experts on these roundtable subjects, they come from a variety of scientific fields, and each one has conducted thoughtful research on these topics in preparation for tonight. Following the discussion, there will be time for Q&A. After the roundtable, please visit the scholars' posters, which are displayed all around the University Club. These posters are a fascinating sketch of each scholar's field of study. Now, thank you for joining us at the ARC's Roundtable on Artificial Intelligence, Social and Philosophical Issues. Please welcome our moderators, Rashmi, MISRA, GM, AI and Emerging Technologies, Business Development, Microsoft. And our scholar panelists, Kate Montana, Integrative Biology, San Francisco State University. Reilly RAAB, Computer Science and Engineering, UC Santa Cruz. Carolyn Smith-Hughes, Epidemiology, UC San Francisco. And Lilia Baldolf, Chemistry, UC Davis.
Good evening. Rashmi Mishra here. My colleague Sirisha is unable to join us at present. If she does join us on a Zoom call, then we'll have the pleasure of her company as well. So I'm still hoping that she will join us. She may join us in an impromptu fashion. Good evening. I'm Rashmi Mishra. I am really privileged to be up here, not just in front of you, but with these amazing young talent. It's entirely my pleasure, and you will understand very shortly why it is my pleasure. During the day, I head Microsoft's business development for AI and emerging technologies. Today, that involves everything we do for AI and AI platforms and services, but also our mixed reality AR, VR, so our immersive technologies, the metaverse, consumer, enterprise and industrial, autonomous systems, autonomous transport, and then also Web3. And excuse the whole shopping list of emerging technologies, but if you weave a thread through all of them, you'll understand why each of them is in that bucket. And I have been involved with some of the most exciting partnerships of late, including the one that everybody knows about. But actually, I've been involved in that journey with our partnership with OpenAI since 2019. So it's been quite a journey. Now, this particular panel is on social and philosophical issues, and I think this alone could possibly take several roundtables on itself. This is probably full of the most pertinent issues in our minds today, wherever you sit in terms of the view on this time that we're at. And I just want to spend a couple of minutes just talking about the time that we're at, because we are at a very amazing point in history where suddenly we have technology that we never thought we would possibly get in our working lives. At least those of us, like myself, who've been in AI for a while, didn't think during our working lives we would be at this moment where everybody is inspired to do something or to create something or to innovate on this amazing technology. With it comes a sense of responsibility, and a sense of responsibility certainly that in the role that I do, we've never taken lightly. In fact, what amazes me sometimes is that this is a technology for which we were almost looking at responsibility in terms of safety, sensitive use cases, making sure that we don't have harmful use cases, long before the technology existed itself, which is quite fascinating for me as well. I also realize that there are multiple opportunities and multiple surfaces of opportunities that we open out with using this technology. But I don't want to keep these wonderful scholars from you, so I think we should really actually just have a quick view of the scholars and what they think and what they're working on. I'd like each of them maybe to start, maybe from Lilia, if you could just go from, tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you're doing today.
Hello, everybody. Ooh, let me get that there. Hi, I'm Lilia. I am a fifth-year PhD candidate at UC Davis. I am a chemist. I work with these soccer ball-shaped molecules called fullerenes. They're basically soccer balls. They're empty on the inside, but they have carbon all around them. They've been subject to a lot of computational chemistry, and as a chemist, I'm strictly an experimentalist, but I work very closely with computational chemists for them to do calculations on what we might be seeing. And where AI is in chemistry is actually quite remarkable in industry. It is currently being used in a lot of small molecule drug design, where instead of hypothesizing or looking at small molecules that might have anti-cancer or anti-tumor properties, we can model it with AI and see how it might react in system, which are more likely to work the best, and also come up with tons of different variants all very quickly. So it's really remarkable what it's doing right now in industry.
My name is Kate Montana, and I am a second-year master's student at San Francisco State University. I also conduct my research at the California Academy of Sciences. And my master's thesis is on the evolution of spiders. So I take their genetic information and do computational analyses to figure out their evolutionary history of a particular spider family called Dictinidae. And while I don't use AI in my daily life, or in my research at least, I am really interested in just generally as a scientist thinking about social and ethical issues and how we consider them when we do our science. I think it's really important and just as important as the science itself. So that's why I wanted to be on this panel. I also was part of a program at San Francisco State called the GOLD program, which stands for Graduate Opportunities to Learn Data Science. So in my data science classes, we were trained to use these techniques in the biological field. So I've done a little bit of AI stuff with like image analyses, and I'm really interested in seeing how we can use these tools to automate our analyses and just open up the field of biodiversity science further. Thank you.
It's on? All right, wonderful. Thank you. I'm Carolyn. I am a third-year PhD student at UCSF. My program is in epidemiology and biostatistics. My research and work areas of interest are in maternal health and newborn health. So what happens to birthing persons and their infants during prenatal care, as they're receiving obstetric care, interpartum, and then also postpartum. We do a lot of quantitative research to say which babies end up in a NICU. We also do a lot of research in, which moms are at risk of different kinds of complications and poor outcomes. And a lot of that is highly, highly quantitative, which is exciting. There are some really great applications of machine learning to build better predictive models in the space. But an area of interest that I have, in addition to looking at clinical outcomes of just who has what conditions, is what is it like for people to receive healthcare in this extremely vulnerable period of their lives. And so that involves both quantitative data, but also qualitative data of us asking people what it's like to receive care in childbirth and listening to their stories and saying, what are their stories telling us? And it's very different from the quantitative stuff. It's really cool. And I also don't do direct work in AI or machine learning applications, but I've seen applications of natural language processing and AI in qualitative studies in people who have given birth. And it's really exciting to see, you can give a model a code book and ask it to help tell us what people are saying. And it's got some really interesting and I think cool applications, but also does fit in that area of what can sort of the machines do versus what human beings can do, and how that affects people and their consent. So that is, I think, why I'm here.
Hi, my name is Reilly. I'm a fourth-year PhD student at UC Santa Cruz studying computer science. My research is in multi-agent systems. So these are systems comprising intelligent agents, many of them, be they human or ML systems, machine learning systems, and what the dynamics of these systems are. For my research, I often publish for fairness in machine learning. So if you've got a machine learning system, it's well understood at this point that you train these systems with just stupid amounts of data. But we know that these data that we train the systems on can already have biases. And so the machine learning system will learn to reflect these biases back at us which yields worse outcomes for certain demographic groups quite often. My research takes that one step further, and as a multi-agent system asks, how are people responding to this? And there are situations in which the machine learning algorithm, reflecting these biases existing in the data already back at us, prompts individuals to choose whether or not they're going to interact with these algorithms in a way that actually self-perpetuates the cycle. It amplifies it. It makes it self-fulfilling. And so there are many instances of this feedback between machine learning and a large-scale population of humans, which yields dynamics that just go off the rails. And this is one of the major concerns. Beyond just immediate bias in the data sets, what are the dynamics that the introduction of machine learning are going to thrust upon society at large?
Thank you all. Very interesting and very diverse interests as well. So let's jump in with some sort of more broad questions. Let me start with one here. So when you look at the social issues that AI can actually accelerate or amplify, what are those, and what mitigation strategies do you think we should apply? I'm gonna start with you, Lilia, just because it's been a while since we've heard from you.
No, happy to talk about it. I think one of the bigger issues is the perpetuation of fake information, or fake news, as it's often called. It's so easy. If you look up AI-generated images, they are remarkably realistic. And I almost didn't know some of them were AI until I was reading about it. So in terms of the social issues, I think it's really... Technology is so amazing in the way that we can all know about things in just an instant. But I do think that perpetuating social issues is also dangerous in the misinformation that it can spread and make it look incredibly realistic. For example, if you go on YouTube, there's a Minecraft series of the presidents playing Minecraft with each other, and it sounds very realistic. It sounds like you're actually hearing Joe Biden and Donald Trump play Minecraft with each other in a weird enough way. But things like that, you can make people say things that they never said. So I think in some ways it's an amazing tool, but in those it's a little dangerous.
Well, why don't we on this one?
Sure. Well, the first one that comes to my mind is racism. I think that, I came up with an example in my mind that is based on a more analog example, but in medical textbooks, as I've heard, I'm not a medical person, but a lot of skin conditions doctors are only trained to understand them on pale skin, and so more melanated skin is not known to be it's not as well known by the professionals. And so then I think about maybe an image analysis tool that is trained to recognize some sort of melanoma or some kind of skin condition. And I think about the training sets that those image analyses AIs are trained on, and you need to have a wide range of input data in order to get a wide range of effective output data. So I think about, what are the data going into these programs, which then connects also to, it stems from the greater, where this information comes from. I think about communities of color not being as trusting in especially in medical establishments, and being mistreated in the past. So might not have access to participate in these studies, or just might not want to because it's not something that's been good to them in the past. So this is a sort of convoluted example, but all to say that the data that goes into these programs ultimately reflects the outcome that we get from them, and that example is one that I think of when thinking about racism in particular.
Thank you for that example. And Carolyn, in your field especially, this becomes really important, I guess, in terms of the data that you have, but also the outcomes that you deliver from there as well. Can AI also be able to help to reduce the implications that we were just talking about in terms of, reducing the pool of outcomes?
I hope so. I hope that that's where one of these big areas of promise is in. Like when we look at so much of the funding in maternal and newborn research, at least in the U.S., a lot of it is focused on how do we address the disparities that we see, and we have a Black maternal health crisis in this country, and it is unacceptable, and we need to change it. It is because of social issues and data issues, and so if we don't. If we just put in the clinical data that will tell us the same sort of predictors may technically be correct, but the answers are wrong. And so we need to be able to put into the system more data and more information in order to be able to look at the root causes and how to address them. And I think part of that is bringing people to the table who are the most affected by it and bringing them early to listen to what their needs are, how do they feel about the information, their data that's being used, and how to solve the issues. I think we also need to look at who stands to benefit most and how do we adjust executionally and from an implementation perspective. There may be huge potential for an insurance company to save money by using AI to better predict who is at risk of expensive conditions. And let's say it's a private insurer who has the ability to hire the people and pay for that system. Clinically, their patients will benefit most. And what if Medicaid doesn't have that ability? Half of births in this country are covered by Medicaid, and the majority of the people who are covered by Medicaid face the hardest social and structural issues. So I think we need to look at it from all of these dimensions to make sure that we can harness it for the potential that it has.
Really interesting point. So to Kate's point then, how do we bring in, since you say it is actually essential that you bring in all pools and all diverse participants, how do we bring those very people who are unlikely to participate in those very studies and with their data? Any thoughts on?
I can jump in quickly. Yeah. I think it's also important to not just think of it as like, how do we pull in people, but how do we all make sure that existing labs, existing people who are already from marginalized communities are uplifted and to do their own research and their own work that is already ongoing. I think of a researcher named Dr. Crystal Sosi, who runs a native an indigenous genetics lab in Arizona, I believe. And so her perspective is really it's all done by indigenous people because indigenous DNA has been misused in the past. So I think funding existing labs and existing infrastructure that does exist and just empowering the people who already have that knowledge and that perspective to do the work. And just making sure they're at the table and that there's not a lock on the door to the dining room.
Thank you for that. And I should say to the audience, at any stage, if you've got a question, please put your hand up and I will attempt to come your way with the mic. Reilly, so given your work and the work that you're doing in sort of multi-agent reasoning systems and the issues that the other three panelists have brought up, what roles in your mind should regulatory bodies, governments, other forces on that system of multiple agents in a population actually be playing here, if any?
This is multifaceted. I don't know to what extent regulation should be the primary tool. One of the things I think we have to be concerned about is regulatory capture. At the moment, the leading systems for natural language processing is controlled by the the companies that have the means to use all of this computation to train the models. And these models are still kind of under lock and key. And so, yes, there's a call for regulation to slow things down, but at the same time, on whose terms? I can also imagine a world in which regulation only entrenches the use of AI in a capitalist model where it's monetized before prioritizing social benefit. There is a case to be made that market forces themselves can be used to pay people for the data which is needed to correct biases. I don't know if this is the only solution. I'm just kind of spitballing here. Paying people for data might be part of the equation. There's also an issue where data becomes perhaps the way you have to give up your own private data in order to even benefit from these systems. I can foresee privacy kind of diminishing with time, where instead of having to pay people for data, you only get access to these systems if you're submitting your own private data as well. And so this will have social implications.
Thanks.
I've just kind of thrown out.
There's quite a lot of things there. Actually, there's a question there, so I'm going to try and head over there with the mic.
What is the risk that AI undermines K through 12 education and the ability to teach writing and critical thinking, or put otherwise, exacerbates income inequality?
As opposed to the status quo?
So maybe I might start at the other end with that, if you'll allow me.
Yeah, of course. I came from a lower income public school, and so I understand too well the inequalities that exist in the public education, even within the public education system, and then the public to private education system. I can imagine AI doing quite a bit of damage, but also quite a bit of good. Like, imagine putting on a VR headset and you can see an actual model of the human body, or like a whale or something like that. But in terms of students being able to think critically, it becomes hard to persuade them to do so when a machine can just do it like that. So I think that is both the job of the community, their parents, the teachers, the people around them, to encourage that we should continue critically thinking. The machine can do so much, but it comes from humans ultimately. So the critical thinking is important for us to being able to coexist with artificial intelligence.
I also have an opinion there, if that's okay. I've actually seen in the last few months rather innovative approaches to how people are dealing with education in terms of not just as accessibility across all different ages from K to 12, but also in how bespoke learning paths are created, just understanding attention, people's or students' learning capabilities, their ability to be inspired by a piece of learning context or capability or a tool that might be in a particular subject, but also applying different sort of graph structures to how do people learn and what knowledge is dependent on others. And actually, I've even seen somebody use things such as what knowledge is easily forgotten if not repeated in their curriculum on a regular basis. So I actually am pretty excited by some of the tools being used in terms of both equity, in terms of allowing access to those that may not have consistent teaching skills available to them, but also in terms of tools to actually help cater for diverse learning facets as well.
If I can jump in, I think education is one of those areas that I'm most excited about, but I do share your concern that it's only going to amplify social disparities because the people who will benefit first are the people who have the most privilege already, or the social groups that have the most privilege. I think this is actually my leading concern broadly, is the introduction of such a disruptive technology will immediately benefit those who are able to monetize it, already have the capital to benefit from it. You'll see these widening disparities. You'll see the ability to manufacture false or fake news and propaganda at whim. I think the biggest risks I see are just growing instability, widening gaps, a lack of trust between groups that have to function together in a democracy. And it might be that regulation is necessary there, but we're still struggling to come up with the right formulas.
I can take another audience question.
This is a general question. How would AI help someone who is unfamiliar with Van Gogh or Beethoven or Shostakovich to appreciate the dimension of their work, their creativity?
Have you played with the latest language learning models, so ChatGPT or GPT-4? I think this is already within the realm of possibility, that you can just query these existing systems, like, how would you explain this? And it'll write an essay for you. a lot of information about anything that's been written about previously and is available online has to some extent been absorbed by these models, and you can query them for any knowledge that is existing online. So that is already within the realm of possibility, and you just have to ask it.
Lilia, I think you have.
Sorry, I just had another one. I also did my bachelor's in music, so I just talking about Shostakovich or Beethoven. I just imagine, like, from a musical education standpoint, a lot of music, especially of the greats, is very mathematical, and it would be so wonderful if that was more widely understood. A lot of people don't understand that the arts and science are actually very overlapping in their disciplines, mathematics, symmetry, and so that would be quite amazing if, say, you were more of a STEM-oriented person, but you liked listening to music, and you're like, oh, maybe there's patterns here, and you could put in a song, and it would show you this is reminiscent of their previous works, or it was written at this specific time. These are the motifs specific to this point. This is what it's trying to get across. It's church music. This is the point in the service. So it'd be really incredible to have that more widely known to people instead of just, it's classical music.
Carolyn, did you want to? Anything?
Sure. I mean, I guess it just does sort of to bring the two questions together. I agree. I think that the potential could be huge. It does bring up sort of an interesting implementation issue when we think about, like, education, for example, for K-12 kids, that they may be able to sort of get the experiences, say, from a model, but then putting in the checks and balances that people don't exploit the system, and then have it, help them write essays, and what is attribution, because we deal with that today. What is attribution in terms of an idea that you write into your own words, but is someone else's idea, and then it becomes the model's interpretation of it, and ensuring that people are getting out of it what they need from learning these things, and improving their access to it, but then also preserving the integrity of the learning process, and helping it, not just allow kids to, write their essays more quickly, and then also, again, attribution of ideas even. So not just straight up plagiarism, but having a model tell you something, and then you just put that into an essay versus going through more of a process.
It's a really important point. I do remember, maybe some of you here do as well, I remember my elder sibling saying to me once upon a time, if you use a calculator all the time to do your maths homework, you'll never know how to use the log table ruler. So I think we might be at another moment of this with the correct attribution. Using the right tools might be helpful as well. Any other audience? Oh, there is one. Okay, let me go there. I'm going to reach over, sorry.
Can you tell us how quantum computing could help AI, particularly the bias in it?
Particularly in what? I'm sorry?
Bias in quantum in AI and quantum computing. How can it enhance?
So I studied quantum computing in my undergrad. We are quite a ways away from any scalable approach that works anywhere near the scale of the models that we're training with AI. But in theory, quantum computing might offer superior optimization algorithms. At its heart, machine learning is just an optimization of a specific loss function on all of this data. But the math isn't, like, what you're able to optimize isn't fundamentally different with quantum computing for the application of machine learning. And so I don't know that it's going to give us any new tools in that regard. You might just be able to run larger models, but we're a number of years away from that.
Can you please give a definition of quantum computing?
So, yes. It's a bit of an open question as to what the computational power of quantum computing is relative to classical computing. But broadly, quantum computing exploits the ability to assign superpositions to bits of information. And so the laws of probability that we use classically are different in quantum mechanics. And so you're able to exploit interference of wave functions in a way that let you do certain computations faster. It's an open question which ones you can do faster, but they're the same computations ultimately. And so if we were to apply them to machine learning, maybe we could do them faster, maybe we can run bigger models, but it would still be the same math that we're using the computation for.
I think that was so well described that I might just add one tiny bit before we move on, which is so there are large problems such as the I guess evolving weather patterns, climate change, multifaceted, multivariable problems, which today, frankly, seem insurmountable without the ability to have those extra dimensions that Reilly was describing in terms of quantum computing. So the addition of quantum computing with AI, I think, when the reality hits us, becomes a rather exciting possibility for some of these larger problems, larger scale problems. So exciting times. Yes. I have one more question there.
I'm still back to the idea of how do you train this generation and future generations to continue to do really good critical thinking. I started in AI in the 80s, okay, when expert systems, of course, were the only thing. And the one thing that I felt ethically comfortable with was that we were putting into the software the opinions of known experts. And so I felt that ethically, if people didn't have the background to question the result, let's say in medical areas in particular, that at least they were getting the best knowledge that we knew at the time. I'm very concerned about how we do that because, of course, in the 80s, we didn't have the web, right? I mean, so we were having to go out and develop our own data. And when I hear all of you talk, I'm still not comfortable with what are we going to do? I mean, I'm really worried about, because people can't become experts in every single field. And how do you help people so that they're not scammed? As somebody in her 80s now, I can tell you it really worries me, okay?
I can start. I think I have an example of a nice tool that I think has a good balance of the things that you're talking about. There's an app called iNaturalist that I use in my work quite a bit. iNaturalist, like iPhone, but iNaturalist. And this app is designed to, one, help people have the opportunity to go outside and understand the organisms in their environment. And it also helps scientists as well. So basically how it works is you have the app on your phone and you go out and say you see a chamomile flower somewhere. You take a picture of it and maybe you know it's chamomile, maybe you don't. But when you take the picture, there is an AI image analysis in it that has been trained on many pictures of chamomile. And then based on that, it will decide if this is chamomile or maybe this is a daisy, maybe this is some other flower. And so the app will offer a suggestion of the species that this flower might be. And so I think it's a great way to teach kids and adults and anybody really who's interested in taking a tool and using it to understand the natural world and understand something that they would otherwise, have to go look up in a field guide and like really go through all of the options and figure out. It just, kind of speeds up that process, and then you can see, oh yeah, I think this is chamomile. But then the other part of it that I think speaks to your question is that that initial identification is not accepted as true until two people have verified it, and then it becomes research grade. So there's a community of people on iNaturalist who go through these images and they say, oh yeah, this is chamomile, and I agree, check. And they need two human beings to look at that photo and say, yes, this is this. Yeah, exactly. No, they're not. They're Correct. They are anybody in the community who has the expertise. So, I mean, it's possible for two Joe Schmoes on the street to be like, hey, let's misidentify all the chamomile in this app, but it seems a little unlikely. So I think this is a nice way that kind of balances using it as a tool to amplify and further be immersed in something that we would be interested in otherwise, while also keeping sort of the expert opinion relevant. And then these data are also used by scientists. I use them in several of my research projects in order to have, abundance and occurrence data that can tell me, where in California this sea slug is, or where in California the scorpion is. And it's often used in schools as well to teach kids about their environments in their own backyards.
So let me ask one of you to jump in. Anybody else, or do you want to jump in? Go, right.
So I wanted to address the question about a lack of critical thinking. And I think in the US, this is something I'm a little worried about, especially when we're completely inundated with AI-generated propaganda. However, there are parts of the world that I think have inoculated themselves to this level of propaganda. And in that respect, perhaps we can learn something from them, specifically Soviet bloc countries, I think might have something that we can learn from, Ukraine in particular, in how they deal with propaganda. And I think the US will have to go through a social transition, which will be painful. We'll start trusting official sources of information less. It may not be purely critical thinking driven, but I have faith for people to question things that might be false and reason about them.
A very interesting question, actually. And I would just say, some of the new models are very, very powerful. They do amazing things in terms of multi-turn, multifaceted conversations. They output a lot of creative output as well. And, I guess for that reason, growth space in that space in terms of new applications, we look at very much as calling them co-pilots instead of autopilots. Ones that are really driven by having a human in the loop to be able to understand what is and differentiate between what is real here and what is not, so that we actually keep that critical thinking in the loop, but then reinforce that learning with our expertise as well. So I think that's a really important topic today. So I have one more question maybe for our bright budding researchers here, because I'd really like to understand what they think are the responsibilities and onus on us as researchers using AI in our work every day, and as you all complete your dissertations and projects as well. How do you view that? So I don't mind which order, whoever wants to go first, we can mix it up. Carolyn, why don't you go first?
Sure. I guess there's two things that I want to bring up, and I think one of them I'll go through quickly because I think someone mentioned it, but is the issue of consent and consent to use data. So in maternal and newborn health, we use a lot of observational data. So, are we just allowed to put people's data into the models and use it, often for our own benefit, which is that we get our educations and we get our publications and our careers rise, versus what are the benefits for the people who give us their data and trust us with their data. Another issue that, because I do some work in global health and lower resource settings, is our obligation as researchers and scholars and people who have the benefit of seeing this and getting training on it as it's really evolving and emerging and getting to benefit from it first. And then think about what our counterparts in lower resource settings who are receiving their training in their settings and the slowness that they receive this sort of training and the benefit from this kind of thing. And I experienced it from the fact that, not on AI, but some other methodologies that are much more common here in the US and that people do not receive training on in countries like in sub-Saharan Africa, in Zimbabwe, where I did some field work. And I got one of the best experiences of my life that has led me here in implementing a method that I learned here because I had access to it and because we can teach it here, and benefiting from the fact that we don't have people in country who have access to that training and the capacity to do that research. And I think it would be great if we can all work together to not have the trickle down be so slow in terms of the implementation and research, implementation and benefits to our counterparts that are in lower resource settings or lower access areas.
Thank you. Lilia.
So in chemistry in particular, I think one of the biggest things that we can do when working with AI is use honesty and integrity. At least in an academic setting, it would be so amazing if you could publish all these new and novel results by just tweaking the algorithm just a little bit. So it could potentially lead down a dangerous path of kind of chasing, what I'm forgetting the expression of my head. What is it? Chasing waterfalls? That's a song. Anyway, but along the lines of chasing things that don't really exist. So honesty, integrity, I think, are really important, at least in my line of work, of being able to present results and you're being truthful about them, even if they're not as amazing as you think they are. And the second one, going back to it, is critical thinking. I think we need to start teaching critical thinking at a young age in the public school system. It isn't taught, quite frankly, up until you go to university. And even then, depending on the university, it might not be readily available to you. So if we start teaching critical thinking skills from a younger age, I think we'll slowly build a generation of people who not only can coexist with AI, but recognize falsehoods and all the benefits and maybe work to make it even better than it currently is.
Reilly, do you want to go next?
I'm still thinking.
Still thinking? Okay, well, Kate.
Will you repeat the question, please?
Yes, the question was what do you think are our responsibilities as researchers in the use of AI and how we use that within our work?
Great. Do you want to go, Brett?
Yeah, sure. So I really think it has to be the level of integrity to resist the immediate incentives that we're placed in to publish, to be the first. As long as we're constantly driven to put out the next iterative development, to be the first to market with a new product, to capture some market segment, I'm quite afraid. Because we're locked together in this struggle, to frame it in terms of multi-agent dynamics, where there's a poor Nash equilibrium, if anyone's familiar with the prisoner's dilemma. If you don't do it, or if I don't do it, you will. And I think as long as we're not able to overcome those immediate incentives and pressures and slow down and try and think about what the implications of our work might be, I fear for the direction that research might
So let me ask you something, just pushing a little bit here. Is it better than the testing of AI is done by AI engineers? We both know what they're like. Or is it better that people who are going to use the software, the model, actually allow them to be able to test out boundaries of nuances of geographical use, of diverse use, of use in different industries that have different assumptions from what you and I would create?
Yeah, but I think you could go one step further than that argument and talk about open sourcing models. So if your argument is that you need to put this in as broad as the hands of as broad a population as possible to get them to give feedback that's meaningful. You could say the same thing about the underlying research, the implementation, the model weights, and that.
I think they're slightly different, but we could take that off we could take that off the stage, perhaps. I think. Kate.
Sure. For me, I think it all comes down to remembering that AI is a tool and it's used by humans. It's not using humans. And so I think we just need to make sure that we have the checks and balances and things in place so that to keep it a tool. And then as with any other tool in science, I think it's our responsibility to think about all the stakeholders involved in our project and see who we're really doing this for. Is it because we want another publication and we want to continue our career, or is it for the greater good? And then we can see how we can use that tool of AI to achieve that. So I think always keeping in mind that question of why are we doing this, who are we doing this for, and who gets to participate and how we do it is ultimately how we keep it in check.
Wow. Well, I think you'll agree with me that I think our future of AI is pretty safe in the hands of these researchers. I'm really excited. Thank you all very much. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.